My name is John Terna, the face behind Smart Media, like I told you yesterday. Today we'll be looking at some issues and issues that has to do with public concerns. I'll be taking just 15 minutes of your time, just intend to stay longer than 15 minutes. But before I go into the issues of the day, of course, you know that today in Nigeria, there have been issues of VDM arrest and protest hitting the street of Abuja. People, social media influencers, activists hitting the street of Abuja, and then youths demanding for the release of very dark man. Of course, you know that very dark man was arrested last month, last week. Of course, last week he was arrested by the combined forces of EFCC, the Nigerian Police, and the Department of State Services at a GT Bank here in Abuja. And then so the protesters demanded for the release of VDM. Of course, so social media influencers like Juju and the rest led a protest for the release of social media influencer VDM. And then from there, of course, there were war of words between the presidency and the outgoing president of the African Development Bank, talking about Adewumi Adesina. Of course, you know Adesina is the outgoing president of African Development Bank. And what was the war of words all about? Adesina was like 64 years ago, Nigeria was far better off than it is today. And you know, the presidential spokesperson talking about Onanuga, by Onanuga, hit back at Adesina, saying that Adesina's statistics and his indices are not correct. And there was a particular report by Daily Trust newspaper talking about how that the World Bank is predicting that most of the rural areas are suffering worse poverty, but the presidency seems not to accept those indices that were put out there by the World Bank. And then the president of African Development Bank too came around and talks about how that Nigeria was better off 64 years ago. And those are some of the issues that happened today, and I just want to bring a recap before I dive into the issue. One of the major issues I want to discuss today. And what is a major issue? Talking about JAMB. Of course, JAMB released student score about 1.9 million candidates sat for the 2022 UTME examination. And then we saw the statistics that was put out there by JAMB. What is the statistic? About 400 or 4,000, over 4,700 thereabout, scored 300 and above, and 12,000 above 12,000 score 300 and less. Why? Yes, 12,000 score less than 200. No, less than 300 score. They score less than 300. About 12,000 candidates score less than 300. Why? 1.5 million, over 50% of those who sat for 2025 UTME scored less than 200. And that brings about concern that how the education system of Nigeria is, if students who have been given enough time by the UTME to register for JAM and could not make an higher score. That will bring about concern from educational stakeholders and other stakeholders, of course, that stakeholders involved with saying that what is the reason for the mass failure? Why 1.5 million, about over 1.9 million sat for the 2025 UTME exams, why 1.5 million score less than 200? And then I think I spoke with somebody earlier about that the government of the day will still be forced, the government of the day will still be forced to bring down the score to accommodate people who score less, And then I think during Buhari's administration, it was brought down to 160 to enroll into the university. Was it 160 or 170? But this also bring about how that the Nigerian society needs to wake up in the educational sector, need to to come up and then maybe bring about changes in the educational system. The educational system of Nigeria, honestly, with the score and with the statistics that were put out there by JAMB today, is not encouraging. And several stakeholders who are involved in such will need to wake up. And who are those stakeholders? The first stakeholder that will be called out are the parents of those candidates, those children who sat for the 2025 UTME examination. What was their effort? Is it just to register a child for UTME exams and then from there you leave the child, or you go on and follow up and maybe check out how was the preparation level of that child, and what was the preparation that was put in place to ensure that that particular child get the desired score as set out by JAMB. Okay. So, and then the other stakeholders, what of the children themselves, the candidate themselves, how prepared were they? Most of the time, because of the distractions caused by the social media and various social media platforms, of course, you should expect that most of the children, is it 14 and above, as put out by the National Cybercrime Center of the Nigerian Police Force last year, that 14, a child who before reaching 16 must have visited the internet countless times. And then that brought about a worrisome statistics that most children or most teenagers spend more time on the internet, than studying their books. So you see, several stakeholders. I've called out about two stakeholders. What of the schools? But I want to bring it to your notice that most of the children or the teenagers who sat for these examinations, some of them must have passed out from the secondary school because they've written once, written twice, have not gotten admission. So they still the other stakeholders believe that maybe not, because most of the children who are from SS3 who wrote this the UTME in SS3 perform better than those who have passed out from the secondary school and are rewriting JAMB again for the second, third, or fourth time. Okay. So that will bring about people or stakeholders rising up to the occasion to ensure that the educational system gets back educated. Of course, before then, how students perform in JAMB very well, about 200 and above. But this time around, hardly you see what was the percentage? Let me refresh your mind again. I said 1.9 million students sat for over 1.9 million students or teenagers or children or any one of them. Of course, it's not just children that write UTME. 1.9 million candidates sat for 2025 UTME examination. 1.5 million, like more than half of the percentage of those who sat for them score less than 200. Just 4,000, over 4,000 and thereabout scored 300 and above, and 12,000, over 12,000 score 300, 300 and less than 300. So that particular statistics is very worrisome, is very demanding, calling for stakeholders across the educational sector to rise up to the occasion. I call out the candidates themselves, the parents, and then the teachers, those who, sometimes some of these students do not actually prepare very well for this examination. And it is a CBT exams where it is timed. It's not like some of us who wrote when it was analog. You have to take your time and write, although it was orchestration of time, but the technicalities in writing UTME examination these days is more complex than it is when it was handwritten. But technology is advancing, and so every way of doing things need to be advanced. So you may not necessarily blame the fact that it is because a CBT type of exam, that is why the student did not perform well. But I believe that before then, some of the students must have been put through, and some of the centers must have put those candidates through on how to go about this writing these particular exams. Okay, but it's very worrisome, and I believe that the government the state government, the educational people who are stakeholders in the educational sector need to rise up to the occasion. Parents, candidates, students, teenagers who are writing more than once need to do more than just going to register. When the day come, you see people happy going to their exam centers. Oh, I'm going to write UTME. I'm going to write UTME. And then you see even their colleagues, their friends escorting them to the venue, and then all about. It's about getting it right and then getting it right. But to be rest assured, the Nigerian candidate who wrote the 2025 UTME examination performed poor because 1.5 million, over 1.5 million, more than half of the population of those who sat for this year's examination performed poor, below the 200 score. Okay, just 4,700 thereabout scored 300 and above, and 12,000, over more than 12,000 scored 300 and below. Putting it, these particular statistics or some of the statistics back to back, you see that those who performed below average are more than those who performed above the average score. What can we do than to keep on bringing to the notice of those stakeholders who are involved in educational system to rise up to the occasion? Okay, and then one particular shocking thing is, for after writing these particular examinations, the government of the day will be forced to bring down the score to be able to accommodate the mass failures of these kids. I think 3 years ago, when the Buhari administration was in power, I think the score was brought down to the 180 score, which is the average score for someone to gain admission to the university, was brought down to 160, just to accommodate the mass failure that took place in that particular year, for the candidates who wrote the exams. So, what is responsible? What do you think is responsible? Let me know your comment. Let me know your thought in the comment section. Please, when you come, anywhere you're watching us from, please do well to like and subscribe to follow this channel on issues with Terna. Don't just come, view, and go. Like, comment, and then drop your comment, your thoughts in the comment section. When I'm done with the streaming, I'll go through them and then find out what you think is responsible for the mass failure in 2025 UTME JAMB examination, which is a gateway to university, to polytechnics, colleges of the education. JAMB have this recently make an improvement. I think last week, our educational correspondent in my station of tours, I told you that I work with independent television, where she did a special report where even people with disability were given platform to write their exam this time. I think the blind, we saw where she even interviewed a blind candidate, and he was saying that okay, he partake in the 2025 examination. I think JAMB have really improved on its process, but one thing that have not been gotten right all this while is this mass failure that have been witnessed in JAMB sitting recently over the past 5 years. It's an alarming rate of failure. It's not something to write home about. So what is responsible? Okay, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Don't just visit the channel and then move like that. Let me just know your thought. What is responsible? And if you are watching us from the outside of the shore of Nigeria, this is Issues with Terna on Smart Media, where we deliberate on issues concerning insecurity, government policies as it affects the masses, the average Nigeria on the street, and how that. But I told you earlier, okay, we're just dwelling on JAMB. In case you are just joining us for the first time, Issues with Terna is just dwelling on the performance of candidates in the 2025 UTME examination. I told you earlier when I started that it's just going to last for 15 minutes. We're not going beyond 15 minutes today. Okay, I just found out that we just need to just touch one or issues and then have a little discussion on it, and then let me know about your thoughts in the comment section. What is responsible? What do you think is responsible for the over more than half more than 50% of the candidates who sat for the 2025 examination performed poor, below average, 1.5 million out of the 1.9 million who sat for the examination. 1.5 million score below 200 score. What will the government of the day do? What will JAMB do, or what will the federal government do? Are they going to bring down the standard again, 150, 140, to accommodate people in the university and the polytechnic? What would you think will be the score that will take people into the polytechnic, and then of course the colleges of education and all the rest? And even school of nursing now have started using the JAMB. So what do you think will be the score? Will the government lower the standard again? Will that help the educational standard in Nigeria? What do you think? Is the educational standard in Nigeria going down, or is it living up to expectation? Did we find people more intelligent back then in those days than now? Social media should be an opportunity where students or candidates will know more, but the mass failure in a JAMB examination this time around is alarming. I'm not going to go beyond the 15 minutes I talk about. I'm going to stop here, but when you visit, even after the streaming, you visit and you watch it, let me know about what are your thoughts in the comment section. All right, this is Issues with Terna on the Smart Media channel. Until tomorrow, I'll come your way again with an issue, a trending issue. But for now, bye and have a good night rest. Bye for now.